This is Statement Piece, the podcast.
My name's Sita.
And my name's Sophie.
Welcome to the new era of the podcast, where we talk about everything from Nepo babies to middle school fashion nightmares.
Stay tuned.
Hello. Welcome back to Statement Piece, another episode with Sita and Sophie.
Today we're going to be talking about dupes and dupe culture, which has kind of taken TikTok especially by storm. And a lot of the time these sort of dupe videos, which have become really popular, they feature a young woman who will come and talk into their front-facing camera about something that they found that kind of mimics maybe more of a expensive product. This could be a makeup or a piece of shapewear, and it's kind of always told in a tone of, they're letting you in on a fun little secret, very girl to girl. Because I think a lot of this, it obviously has to do with shopping. Oftentimes, that's very women-coded, female-coded content. So I was actually thinking there's sometimes a lot of mystery around this term dupe, because what does dupe even mean? So I was curious, Sita, what you thought, how you would define dupe, just off the top of your head.
Well, it's interesting because when we decided that we were going to do this episode, I was thinking about what is the difference between a dupe and a fake or counterfeit item. And I think dupe is supposed to be short for duplicate.
Mm-hmm.
But is duplicate different from fake or counterfeit? I don't know. But as a consumer of TikTok content, I really think dupe is if you had an item and you wanted to find something that was similar but at a lesser price point.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be compromising quality and the exact mimicry, I guess, of it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of a close second, I would say.
Well,
how about you?
Yeah, I have a whole list here where there's kind of that basic definition of dupe, meaning a less expensive alternative to name brand products. And then counterfeit, the dictionary definition of counterfeit is made an exact imitation of something valuable or important with the intention to deceive or defraud. So you could buy, for instance, a dupe of the Dyson Airwrap.
Mm-hmm.
It might, as some of these TikToks are saying, give you a similar effect or produce a similar quality of result, but be more cost efficient. But it's not claiming to be the original. And then a knockoff, because I looked up, all these words feel like they run into each other, which is like a knockoff is a copy or imitation, especially of an expensive or designer product. So knockoff feels also kind of more general. For funsies, I added the word spoof, which is a humorous imitation of something, typically like a film or genre of film. I was thinking a lot of those sweatshirts that looked like they said Yale sweatshirts, but instead they said kale, something like that. So it would be something that is kind of like winking, where there's more of a self-awareness, and it's not trying to pass off as something else. And I think that's, it's like cheekily knowing that it's copying, whereas I feel like the counterfeits are more for sure, we're just trying to be this other thing and we want to tell you we are that thing. We're a Chanel handbag, but in actuality it's cardboard. Mm-hmm.
No, it's interesting because I feel like this whole concept has exploded on TikTok, whether it be dupes or even counterfeits. I feel like I've seen content on both, where dupes, I've seen a lot of examples of makeup. There's the Charlotte Tilbury Flawless Filter, and then there was an e.l.f. quote-unquote dupe that was very similar for $5. And similarly, there's Clinique's famous Black Honey lip balm, lip gloss, lipstick type of deal, and CoverGirl had a $5 version, which completely sold out on Amazon. So those have definitely become more prevalent. I also have seen on TikTok links to sites like AliExpress or DHgate, where I feel like they are trying to sell actual counterfeit items. It's interesting that these TikToks have been gaining popularity, because I almost think, is that a reflection of what society is looking for nowadays?
Yeah. Well, I was even thinking about how, from a media perspective, dupe content is really easy to make money off of, especially when people are driven towards clicks, and affiliate links are often how media and social media influencers make money. I think you were kind of getting at this too, though, that is this really anything new? When I was little, more often than now, but especially when I was younger and you could still get physical copies of magazines, I would always see this feature that's like get the look for less, where it would be you'd find the celebrity like outfit and then they'd be like, this is the Hermes blazer that they were wearing, and here is a J. Crew one that looks very similar. And
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen some content where people are buying dupes off of Amazon, and you'll almost have on the page where you're buying from like a photoshopped image of what the original item is, and then it arrives and it may be completely different. I have a friend who orders a lot of things off of Amazon, and it's such a leap of faith because you never really know what you're going to get.
yeah, and it's funny that you
Yeah.
mentioned Stuart Weitzman being okay with people like Steve Madden kind of knocking off his designs. And there's that saying, imitation is a form of flattery.
Mm-hmm.
And I did look up a little bit the kind of the history of dupes to an
Mm-hmm.
extent in fashion. Starting with the 18th century, diamond jewelry was imitated with paste. And then there was this whole movement where in department stores, people were sent to Paris Fashion Week to covertly draw the collections and then bring them back so people could basically remake the designs and sell them as like Paris originals. And even the OG designers like were split on how they thought about fashion. Madeleine Vianney was like literally so terrified of counterfeits that she used her own fingerprint on labels to prevent anyone from replicating her designs. Christian Dior was also not a fan and used invisible ink that could only be revealed by black light to prevent counterfeits. And then like Balenciaga and Givenchy kind of kept the press out of their shows for a while so that
Mm-hmm.
they couldn't copy them. But then also Coco Chanel saw copies as good publicity and licensed copies from designers. And then the House of Worth, who we previously talked about in the nepotism episode, they were kind of the OG fashion house, also pioneered the idea of giving licensed sketches and how to make the design, and so that they could kind of co-opted it and like sort of shared in the duping, but kind of on their terms. And it's interesting that now instead it's like big box stores that are profiting from this, like Alibaba, Amazon, and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's interesting because even though there's a historic component to it, it definitely is still happening today. Recently, Lululemon had an event in LA where they were offering everyone to bring in dupes of their leggings, and they were going to give each person who brought in a dupe an original new pair of leggings, which obviously is not sustainable, but I thought that was interesting. They have so much hope and faith in their product that they know it's going to prove their customer otherwise, and that their customer should not be looking at dupes and really trying to strive for the real thing. Also, there's a sunglasses company called Lexola, and they usually cost around $300 a pair. They've kind of been seen from celebrities to influencers. And recently, the New York Post ran a story on dupes for Lexola glasses. And it was interesting that the Lexola company, Instagram, they put it on their story and they said, swipe up, we love dupes. Here's where you can shop to get the best Lexola dupes. And I thought that was interesting because here are companies really acknowledging the fact that dupe culture exists. People are buying dupes of their products, so why not support it?
I don't know if have you seen those videos in Cosmopolitan where it's like they call it expensive taste test.
Oh, yeah, luxury taste test. Yeah.
And they like you go like each, for those of you who listeners who aren't initiated, it's like a celebrity will go through and there'll be different like rounds where they'll get a different product, two examples of that product, one being like a more expensive example, one being a less expensive example. So it would be like a $500 moisturizer versus $5 moisturizer, and like they're all in like the most neutral cups, like packaging, and all brand labels removed, and that celebrity has to pick based on just the product itself which one's more expensive. And it's always very interesting because a lot of the time people are wrong. There's some people who are like always like on the money. I think Paris Hilton was like 10 for 10, like ran the across the board. But like it does kind of show that sometimes I think once you get to a certain point, whether it's like leggings or sunglasses, it kind of is all the same, but like also, is it? How much is that true and how much is it not, you know?
This goes back to our episode from last week, being able to have dupes of quiet luxury items. Like, yes, you can have two blue sweaters, but one may be cashmere and one may be rayon, and one may be hand knit and one may be using a machine. Who knows, right? But I think the interesting part about dupes and the popularity of it is that we can't trace where it's coming from, and we don't know how it got there, and we don't really know the quality difference unless you have it physically right in front of you and you're testing it yourself.
Well, I feel like that's the whole thing, is that you can't ever say for certain that more expensive stuff is always better, but also you
Mm,
can't say for certain that cheaper things are always better. Like there's always like a tipping point when things kind of start to sort of crash one way or the other. A moisturizer should never cost $1,000, but a moisturizer also I don't think necessarily should cost $1 either.
mm.
But I think that kind of leads pretty well into the next section.
All right, so catch us in the next section. Okay, so now we are going to talk a little bit about the social implications of dupe culture. And I think one great example is the fashion brand Miro Palais. It's pretty new, actually. And it was founded by Marcelo Gaia, and his work has completely been ripped off and has been the target of dupe culture. And I really think that goes down to the fact that they're these really unique and super appealing designs, but they are very expensive and definitely not as accessible as maybe the demographic that they're trying to target. And so it brings up this whole question of dupe culture. Like, yes, we want to appreciate and value the creativity of designers and make sure that's recognized, but at the same time, if there's no accessibility, is that okay as well? As we mentioned in the last section, dupes is not new. I think the nature of fashion, specifically fast fashion, has been known to take runway looks or designer looks and make affordable versions of them very, very quickly at a fast pace. And then there's all these trends that are disseminated into the general public. And I think with that, because we live in a world that's focused on virality and influencers and creators having new looks every single day, it is easy to fall into the dupes that are available to us, whether it may be from Shein, H&M, ASOS, Zara, whatever it may be, as they're able to turn out so many different versions of clothing.
Well, I think that's interesting that you're talking about how it's like all these big box stores, and even thinking back to like the old days of like House of Worth and all the old school designers we were talking about. Like I imagine that back in the day, back in like the even just like the 20th century, when you didn't have the internet, you had to be a store to get this stuff, and you had to have access to the store. And now things are, I think, a bit more chaotic, but I think that there's a lot more options to own Chanel products, resale, vintage, all this other stuff that maybe I still don't think every person can own like OG Chanel, and certainly not every product, but like there's certainly a lot more opportunity. But it's still like feels to me like, and I think you kind of talked about it, that it's also a part of like scale too. It's like it's one thing, and I don't know that it's like even necessarily good, but it doesn't feel as bad when it's like a Shein is like ripping off a Chanel, right? Two giant brands, but you are constantly seeing like designers, young designers, small businesses on Instagram being like, Shein stole my designs. And I remember there was this one dress that went kind of like viral on TikTok. It was the House of Sunny Hockney dress. I think Kendall Jenner wore it from this like relatively small brand that got really like viral, like I said. And then immediately I was also just seeing like there was like a dupe dress on Shein for like significantly less money. I think the original Hockney dress was like at least a couple $100s. And
Hmm.
the Shein dress was obviously like under $50.
Yeah.
So like it was a total ripoff, and it seemed to almost like exploit the virality and the fame of a small brand that could have transformed its business, and
Mm.
kind of almost like overplayed all of a sudden, because now I saw one thing that said like House of Sunny isn't cool anymore, and I'm like, maybe because everyone bought like the same dress because everyone could, and then it
Hmm.
got oversaturated.
I definitely feel that way. I mean, I feel like I've seen something that, oh, that's an interesting trend. And then before you know it, it's literally everywhere. And it's frustrating because obviously you want people to have their own individual taste. But I feel like the nature of fashion and consumption and just living in a society, like everyone is looking for the best thing. And then before you know it, I almost feel like then the design gets watered down as well. But I do think one part about dupe culture that is interesting is that I feel like Gen Z and the younger generations have shown this shift towards being able to trace where things come from. Like you said, you're exploiting designs, exploiting worker rights, especially as a lot of these dupes are created abroad, whereas the originals are in-house, maybe like in the States. It's an interesting contradiction where we're seeing the original designs coming from a small brand that's working with dead stock fabrics, and its value is on sustainability, but then that's completely exploited and turned around. And it's hard for me to understand why Gen Z really accepts that. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. And maybe that's where we see this difference. At the end of the day, yes, we want to do what we can for the environment and for human rights, but how does that play into what we're going to sacrifice in our own personal lives?
Mm-hmm.
What do
Yeah.
you think?
Well, I was thinking about how, like, one of the things that I saw that was like a trend that was repeatedly brought up is how often people and like Gen Zers are kind of aware that branding can be misleading, right? And like there is some truth to the fact that things are more expensive than they need to be, right?
Hmm.
Like I saw an article that's talked about how like the retail markup for like makeup in particular, where you see a lot of dupes, is like insane, like more than any other industry. It's just completely out of proportion. And I feel like Gen Zers, like one of the things that they were saying about dupe culture is that yes, always existed, but now it's like people are proud of having dupes, and
Mm.
that's a weird thing. When I was reading about this content that's been coming out about dupes, it's constantly described as almost like conspiratorial, like, oh, here's how you game the system.
Mm. Well, I feel like that's like a lot of it has been like, oh, I'm not gatekeeping. I'm going to put you on this.
The idea is like, hey, we're in on this secret. But like the secret, the kind of conspiratorial thinking, I feel like worry that I say a lot on this podcast, like, is really, it's hard, if not impossible, to rebel against capitalism under capitalism, especially when like purchasing is involved, right? But like this whole idea of like, hey, guess what? This thing is too expensive, so let's buy the cheaper, more easily made thing, is like, that is so far not even anti-capitalist, like it can't even, like that is just capitalism. The idea
Hmm.
like people go toward the thing that costs less than the thing that uses like cheaper labor.
That's so interesting is that you have these small companies, these designers, these creators, and then a lot of the public is like, oh my goodness, how could you charge this much? And are almost angry about it. And I saw this recently. So I follow this creator called Lindsay Versonic. I don't know how to pronounce it, sorry, but she owns a knit company where she does everything by hand. And she recently just released these knit shorts, like really cute mini shorts, and they're over $100. And again, similarly, was getting these comments like, how could you charge this much? So she literally made a video going through basically each step, like how much the yarn is, the fact that it's constructed in New York, which is one of the most expensive places to get something made, and the wages are so much higher here. Then all of the packaging and supply chain management and actually the shipment. So then for something that she designed and the yarn being sustainably sourced is over $100 for a pair of shorts expensive? Sure. But I feel like then what you're getting yourself into, and it almost seems it's just a shame that creators have to defend themselves to charge that much.
Yeah, especially when they're just like one person doing all this stuff. And it's
Yeah.
like, that's what, again, I feel like the contradiction is that I think Gen Z has this sense of justice. And sometimes that sense of justice is for themselves of I deserve, but I can't afford it. So I'm going to like get this. And then that's like the lower prices are like supporting me and everything. Things have to like it can be like a self-centeredness that sort of spins out of it out of proportion, but then like also failing to see that even in terms of like capitalism and who benefits and who doesn't benefit from capitalism, like the independent creator charging $300 for a hand knit hoodie is more on your side than the Shein people who you're buying from who you feel like support you because or are like for the people because of their low prices. Like they're benefiting from the system that keeps things going. And it's almost like I sometimes feel like, you know, I get that people obviously need things. And I think that there are some people who might just be like, well, I want a really nice hair dryer for a really low price and like just have to, they just get what they can get. And I'm not going to hate on anyone for that. I think it's more the people who can't see the forest through the trees and see the power dynamics for what they are and are harassing these independent creators about their work. I understand that there are people who need to buy this stuff that's cheap, and I'm like have so much empathy for that. But sometimes I feel like with the way TikTok trends work and society of overconsumption, it's like there are people who just buy cheaper stuff, not because they need to buy cheaper stuff, but because they're buying cheaper stuff so that they can buy more stuff. They go to Shein because they can get a haul, not because they're like, well, I only have $40 left in my bank account and no winter coat. That I think is stupid, and when it starts to become like ethically and morally really ignorant and dubious.
And I think there are other options. That's the thing. Like you can go thrifting. Yes, is that a time investment? Sure. And some people don't have the time to go thrifting and find exactly what they want and almost replicate different looks with clothing that simply already exists on this earth. But at the same time, is that not better than creating more waste and exploiting more humans?
Yeah.
I think that's a good place to end. And we can get into our own opinions on dupe culture. Doodles.
Welcome back.
So now we're going to talk about our own opinions. Sophie, have you ever bought a dupe?
I have all the time knowingly. I don't think I've ever bought something and then had it be proven a counterfeit, although I did buy a Vivienne Westwood necklace for $50. And Vivienne Westwood, I should put in air quotes because I'm like 95% sure it's a fake, but it's actually a really good one, so I kind of don't care. But I used to use this micellar water on my face called Isden, and it's $35 a bottle, and that's a little bit insane for something that like you literally like washes off. It's not even like a cream or anything. And eventually I was like, oh my God, like I can't be ordering this like $35 fancy micellar water. So I looked it up because also part of the thing that was crazy about this micellar water is that, and the reason why I had a dermatologist who recommended it to me, also because they sold it at their office.
That'll do it.
Yeah, it had very few, very simple ingredients. So they're basically charging you $35 for like nothing in this, like the top ingredients, water. And so I looked up dupes for it, and I found a Garnier Fructis $13 a bottle micellar water that has a very similar ingredient list. So I really worked from the inside out of like, how can I just get this thing that barely has anything in it allegedly for a lot less, because that seemed more logical, and that has been pretty good, and I've liked that. One time when I was in Thailand and I was really having fun with the exchange rate, I did buy a fake Chanel purse that I knew was fake, but it was literally, when I said earlier, I think I mentioned like cardboard that's painted to look like Chanel. I was actually referencing that bag because that's what it was. It was cardboard with felt like taped over it. So it looked like Chanel from far away. But again, if you like felt it, you were like, you could buy this at a children's birthday party. And then the other thing, and this is where I wasn't fully duped, but I was trying to buy my prom dress and I wasn't literate online enough to understand that sometimes I was just too gullible. You go to buy something and you literally see a red carpet photo of an actress wearing this gown, and we'll give you this gown, an exact of this gown for $50. Alarm bells should go off. But it was 2014 and I was 17 years old or whatever, and it didn't happen for me. And so I ordered a dress that was supposed to look this one dress that Emma Stone wore, that's like pink on top and red on bottom or something. And it came and it was literally, Jesus Christ. It was completely not that dress at all, just fabric pinned together. It was eventually worked out because I did end up getting just a nice dress for prom, but I was fooled. So what about you, Sita? Have you ever gotten a dupe / been duped?
So there have been a lot of collaborations with designers and fast fashion companies like H&M, and Target has done a lot of collaborations. So I have bought things from those collections. And I remember specifically there was a collaboration with designers and Target, and one was Philip Lim. This is when Philip Lim's Pashley bag was all the craze and was the hot bag to have at the moment. And the smallest size is priced around $700, but Target, with their collaboration, was selling an even smaller one, and I think it was probably less than 50, definitely less than 75 or so. So I had one of those and definitely wore it as if it was the Pashley. To me, it was the same designer, obviously very different price point, very different quality. So that was something, and I had done that with a lot of different designers and collaborations. So that was one of them. I think another, I had also, when I was younger, gotten a fake bag as well from India. This is when I was 12 years old, and it was a little Louis Vuitton, and I thought I was so cool. But at the same time, I knew it was ridiculous for a 12-year-old to be walking around with a $1,500 handbag. So to me, it was like justifying it a little bit.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. Do you feel like you would ever buy a dupe now? Like, how do you feel about dupes as an adult, looking at all this stuff that's coming out about dupes now?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I was younger, I would look at all these blogs and magazines, and I would be that person who's trying to find the look for less. And that didn't mean I was buying fake things, but definitely dupes where I would be seeing something on the runway or a TV show or something, and then try to find another way to style it and figure it out. I think I only think about buying dupes when they're bigger corporations, such as really big makeup companies, or where I feel like a lot of the price point actually comes in from the packaging and just brand name. But I do really like to support smaller designers and smaller companies, and if I can't afford it full price, then I'm either going to save up for it and know, okay, so much work and attention to detail has been put into this item, and I feel like then it becomes more of a special item in my closet as well because of that, and because I saved up for it.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, I feel definitely with makeup and skincare, although I'm a little more guarded with my skincare. Obviously, I'm okay with buying a dupe now and again, especially when I think it's proven quality. I love looking at reviews of anything I
Me
I
too.
definitely don't think that everything has to be the most expensive, but I do feel I do this all the time, or at least and aspiring to do it more even. Not necessarily copying, not necessarily buying dupes of specific products, but especially within fashion, duping an aesthetic. Kind of what we were talking about with quiet luxury. I'll look at Vogue runway app sometimes and just for inspiration. And obviously, if I see something in Bottega Veneta's latest collection, there was one look that just had this woman was carrying it was a splotchy yellow and black bag. It almost looked like woven beads. And I was searching for a yellow and black raffia or rattan like bag. And in those instances where it's like, listen, I will never be able to afford Bottega Veneta or be able to look at it and be like, I'll take that outfit, please. Like, ring it up directly off the runway. But yeah, I think there's I think there's a middle ground of saying, yeah, I like that style. I want to embody that style and the kind of connotations that come with it, but I don't want to pay the full price. But that doesn't mean I feel like I'm necessarily going to run to Shein and buy that. I think it's more just as a guiding light or as something to like be that can help me maybe be more intentional in my purchases instead of something that I'm okay, well, now I have to have that bag and I have to get it from any source, no matter how dubious their sources are and how poorly they treat their workers. Certain things you got to work around that and you can still have good style even if you can't afford like literally everything.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's what people need to realize. You can't have everything. That's just not how the world works. And
Yeah.
if you can, that's extreme privilege and that's great.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is we can't. And I think one important note is actually when you're looking at content and you're looking at these influencers or TikTokers who are linking all these items, whether it be the original item or the dupe, they have an incentive to do that. The Amazon storefront having a dupe, those creators do get a little bit of commission if you buy through that link.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of the system that's feeding itself. And at some point, you need to take a step back and realize, okay, what is actually important to me? And what do I actually need?
Yeah. Perfect place to end it, I think.
Definitely. Well, if you have any opinions on dupe culture or you have a good dupe, let us know. Sophie, it was great to speak to you.
Sita, it's always lovely to speak to you too.
And we'll catch you all at our next episode.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye bye.